Blood in, blood out, the rituals behind America's prison gangs. Inside some of America's most violent prisons, membership in certain gangs has historically come at a price. Not money, not paperwork, but pain. For decades, investigators, former inmates, court records, and academic researchers have documented initiation systems used by prison gangs to test loyalty, obedience, and willingness to commit violence. Some required beatings. Some demanded assaults. Some required absolute silence. And some rituals were never fully documented at all. The phrase blood in, blood out became widely known as shorthand for a brutal idea. You may enter through violence and leave only through death. While the phrase has often been dramatized in popular culture, real prison gang structures in the United States have used forms of violent initiation, internal discipline, and lifelong allegiance that are well documented by law enforcement and correctional sources. Tonight, we examine the real rituals behind America's prison gangs. How they recruit, how they control, and why leaving can be more dangerous than joining. Before we go further, support the channel by liking this video and subscribing to Life Behind Bars. Your support helps us continue producing deeply researched prison documentaries based on real records, real systems, and real consequences. What blood in, blood out really means. The phrase blood in, blood out is often misunderstood. It is not a single official rule used by every prison gang. It is not a universal code. Instead, it is a broad expression associated with gang culture, especially prison and street gangs, to describe violent entry and dangerous exit. Different organizations have different structures. Some require sponsorship by existing members. Some require a violent act. Some require years of proven loyalty before full membership. And some have no formal initiation at all. But across many documented gang systems, the underlying message is consistent. Joining may be possible. Leaving may not be. That reputation alone can create fear and obedience, even when the exact rules vary. Why prison gangs use rituals? In prison, reputation can be survival. Gang rituals often serve practical purposes. They are not random tradition. They are tools. A violent initiation can test whether a recruit will follow orders under pressure. A secrecy oath can test whether they will remain silent. A required assault can create criminal liability, making it harder for the recruit to walk away later. Researchers who study organized gangs describe these rituals as methods of screening commitment. Inside prison walls, where trust is scarce and betrayal carries serious consequences, loyalty is treated as currency. That is why rituals matter. They turn membership into sacrifice, and sacrifice into control. The beat-in initiation. One of the most commonly documented initiation methods in gang culture is the so-called beat-in. The details vary by group and institution, but the concept is consistent. A recruit must endure a timed group beating from existing members. The purpose is symbolic and practical. Symbolically, it demonstrates toughness. Practically, it allows members to judge how the recruit reacts under stress. Will they panic? Will they retaliate recklessly? Will they remain composed? Law enforcement sources caution that many public descriptions of beat-ins come from interviews, intelligence gathering, and former member testimony, meaning details can differ. But enough accounts exist across multiple jurisdictions to establish that violent initiations have occurred. Not everywhere, not always, but often enough to become part of gang folklore. Putting in work. Some gangs historically demanded more than endurance. They demanded action. This is often described as putting in work. The phrase generally refers to committing tasks that benefit the gang. Those tasks may include smuggling contraband, carrying messages, enforcing discipline, or participating in violence. The most serious allegations involve assaults ordered to prove loyalty. Not every group uses the term the same way, and not every task is violent. But in many documented gang cases, recruits increase status by carrying out assignments. This creates a hierarchy based on demonstrated usefulness. Inside prison, usefulness can become power, and power attracts protection. Sponsors, shot callers, and permission to join. Many prison gangs do not allow random membership. A recruit may need sponsorship. That means an existing trusted member vouches for them. The sponsor's reputation becomes tied to the recruit's behavior. If the recruit fails, cooperates with authorities, or disobeys orders, the sponsor may also lose standing. Above sponsors are leadership figures sometimes referred to in reports as shot callers or senior members. These individuals may approve membership, settle disputes, or assign responsibilities. Titles vary by gang. Structures vary by prison. But organized hierarchy is a common theme in gang investigations. This matters because rituals are rarely isolated acts. They are usually supervised by structure. Tattoos as permanent loyalty. For some gang members, initiation did not end with violence. It continued through identity. Tattoos have long been used within gang culture as markers of allegiance, rank, history, or ideology. Specific symbols vary widely and may differ by region or group. Some are widely recognized. Others are intentionally obscure. In correctional settings, tattoos can carry meaning far beyond appearance. They can announce affiliation before a word is spoken. They can create enemies. They can also make leaving harder. Because unlike a handshake or a promise, they remain visible. Why leaving can be dangerous. The second half of the phrase, blood out, is more mythologized but rooted in real danger. Many prison gangs treat defection as betrayal. Consequences may range from loss of protection to internal punishment, assault, or targeting by former allies. Exact policies differ. Some groups permit inactive status under certain conditions. Others are more rigid. Some reported rules are exaggerated by rumor. Others have been confirmed in prosecutions and inmate testimony. What remains consistent is the risk. Leaving an organization built on secrecy and loyalty can be one of the most dangerous decisions an inmate makes. The rituals of prison gangs are only the beginning. The organizations behind the code. When prison gangs became institutions. Prison gangs in the United States did not begin as fully formed criminal institutions. Many emerged from unstable environments inside overcrowded prisons where violence, racial tension, and scarcity shaped daily life. Groups initially formed for protection. Shared ethnicity. Shared neighborhood ties. Shared enemies. But over time, some of these groups developed structure far beyond self-defense. Leadership hierarchies formed. Rules were written or verbally passed down. Discipline systems emerged. By the late 20th century, investigators in several states concluded that certain prison gangs had become organized power centers capable of influencing both inmate life and criminal activity outside prison walls. They were no longer just groups. They were institutions within institutions. The Aryan Brotherhood. The Aryan Brotherhood is one of the most widely documented prison gangs in the United States. It originated in California prisons during the 1960s, according to multiple law enforcement and academic sources. Federal prosecutions have described the organization as highly violent, racially motivated, and structured around loyalty and retaliation. Investigators alleged that membership could involve sponsorship, proven violence, and long-term commitment. Former members and prosecutors have described internal discipline systems where disobedience carried serious consequences. Because of its notoriety, the group became symbolic of prison gang violence in the American public imagination. However, exact internal rituals are not fully public and may vary across time and institutions. Much of what is known comes from court records, informants, and long-term investigations. The Mexican Mafia. The Mexican Mafia was founded in the California prison system in the late 1950s, according to numerous historical accounts. It later became one of the most influential prison gangs in the United States. Law enforcement investigations have alleged that the group exercised authority over street gangs, prison activity, and extortion networks in some areas. Membership has been described as selective and reputation-based. Violence, discipline, and demonstrated usefulness were recurring themes in public prosecutions. The organization's influence has been documented not only inside prisons but in communities outside prison walls. Its reputation alone often carried power. Many details about internal ceremonies remain unclear or unconfirmed. But prosecutors have consistently described a structure built on secrecy and fear. The Black Guerrilla Family. The Black Guerrilla Family emerged in California prisons in the 1960s. Unlike some prison gangs rooted primarily in race or territory, the group was also associated with political ideology in its early history. Over time, authorities alleged involvement in organized criminal activity including violence and trafficking. Public records describe a structure that blended ideological language with prison power dynamics. As with other gangs, membership and loyalty were treated seriously. However, publicly available information on exact rituals is limited and often contested. Much of what is known comes through prosecutions, correctional intelligence, and academic interpretation. Regional gangs across America. Not every major prison gang came from California. Across the United States, different correctional systems developed their own organizations. Texas prisons saw the rise of groups such as the Texas Syndicate and others tied to ethnicity, region, or neighborhood alliances. Midwestern prisons developed local sets and hybrid gangs. East Coast prisons often reflected street gang structures imported from city neighborhoods. Some groups remained small and local. Others expanded across state lines. This means there is no single American prison gang model. Rituals, hierarchy, and codes differ widely depending on region and era. But the recurring pattern remains. Where prisons create instability, organized groups often fill the vacuum. How loyalty is enforced. Once a recruit joins, the real test often begins afterward. Gang loyalty is commonly enforced through expectation, not ceremony. Show up when called. Follow orders. Do not cooperate with investigators. Support allies during conflicts. Pay debts. Maintain silence. Failure in any of these areas can lead to punishment. Punishment may be social isolation, loss of protection, demotion, or violence. Exact methods vary and are not always publicly documented. But investigators repeatedly note that gangs survive because enforcement is predictable. Members know the consequences before they act. That certainty becomes stronger than formal rules. The power of fear and myth. Not every rule has to be carried out to be effective. Sometimes reputation does the work. Prison gangs often benefit from myth. Stories of harsh punishment. Stories of impossible escape. Stories of members targeted decades later. Some stories are true. Some are exaggerated. Some cannot be verified. But all can shape behavior. Fear reduces resistance. Myth magnifies power. In that sense, gang influence often extends beyond what is physically happening in the moment. The belief that consequences are certain can matter as much as consequences themselves. Why people still join. From the outside, joining a prison gang may seem irrational. Inside prison, the calculation can look different. Protection, access to goods, shared identity, fear of standing alone, pressure from others. These factors have been repeatedly documented in inmate interviews and prison research. Many recruits are young, new to incarceration, uncertain how to navigate prison politics. In that environment, belonging can feel safer than isolation, even when the cost is high. America's prison gangs were built through structure, loyalty, and fear. But their most powerful weapon may not be violence. It may be the ability to control identity itself. Symbols, silence, and control in plain sight. The language of markings. Inside prison, identity is often communicated before a word is spoken. Tattoos, markings, numbers, and symbols have long been documented as part of gang culture in correctional systems across the United States. Some indicate neighborhood origins. Some reference ideology. Some commemorate crimes, loyalty, or prison time. Others are intentionally vague, understood only by members or investigators familiar with them. Law enforcement agencies maintain databases of known gang symbols, but these systems are imperfect. Meanings change. Symbols migrate between regions. And identical imagery may carry different meanings depending on context. This is important, because not every tattoo means gang membership, and not every gang member displays visible signs. Still, in many prisons, markings function as reputation worn on the skin. Numbers, letters, and hidden references. Gang communication is not always direct. Investigators have documented the use of coded numbers, abbreviations, and letter substitutions tied to gang identity. Numbers may reference alphabet positions. Letters may stand for names, slogans, or affiliations. Some codes are widely known. Others remain local and temporary. This constant evolution creates an advantage. Once authorities recognize one system, another may replace it. But public discussion of specific codes can also create myths, leading outsiders to misread ordinary symbols as gang-related. That is why context matters. A number alone proves little. A pattern of behavior means far more. Hand signs and body language. Not all communication is written. Body language can carry meaning in prison environments. Where someone stands, who they acknowledge, how they approach a table, whether eye contact is held or avoided. In some gang cultures, hand signs or gestures have historically been used to signal identity or disrespect rivals. But these practices vary greatly. They are more commonly associated with street gangs than with all prison settings. Inside prison, subtle behavior often matters more than dramatic gestures. Because overt signaling can draw attention from both rivals and staff. In highly controlled environments, discretion can be safer than display. Silence as a rule. One of the most powerful rituals in organized prison gangs is not violence. It is silence. Across numerous investigations, anti-cooperation rules appear again and again. Do not speak to authorities. Do not reveal internal matters. Do not identify members. Do not explain orders. This code is not unique to prison gangs. Many criminal organizations use similar expectations. But in prison, where surveillance is constant, silence becomes especially valuable. It protects structure. It frustrates investigations. And it creates internal trust through shared risk. Breaking silence can carry serious consequences, whether formal punishment, social isolation, or violence. Contraband as communication. Messages inside prison do not always move openly. Historically, correctional investigations have uncovered hidden notes, coded letters, and contraband devices used for communication. The exact methods vary by era and institution. Some are simple. Some are sophisticated. Some details are not publicly released for security reasons. But the goal is consistent: maintain contact, pass instructions, resolve disputes, coordinate movement. Even limited communication can preserve gang structure. That is why prisons devote significant resources to searches, monitoring, and intelligence gathering. Because in organized systems, information is power. Respect, disrespect, and consequence. In gang culture, respect is often more than emotion. It is currency. Inside prison, perceived disrespect can trigger conflicts out of proportion to the original act. Taking another person's seat, interrupting hierarchy, speaking carelessly, crossing invisible boundaries. These actions may seem minor to outsiders. But in closed environments where reputation determines safety, small slights can carry larger meaning. Researchers note that many prison conflicts are rooted less in material issues than in status and perceived humiliation. Gang systems often intensify this dynamic by tying personal conduct to group reputation. An insult to one member can be framed as an insult to many. The role of new recruits. New arrivals are often the most vulnerable people in prison. They may not understand housing politics. They may not know who controls which spaces. They may not know how to avoid conflict. That uncertainty creates opportunity. Gang recruiters, formal or informal, may approach new inmates offering guidance, protection, or belonging. Sometimes the pressure is direct. Sometimes it is subtle. Sometimes no one needs to ask at all. The environment pushes the decision. Many former inmates describe early incarceration as the period when identity is most quickly shaped. Who you stand with, who stands with you, and what that decision costs later. Why symbols outlast members. Individual members come and go. Sentences end. Transfers happen. Leadership changes. But symbols often remain. A number scratched into a wall. A phrase passed to younger inmates. A tattoo copied across generations. These symbols create continuity. They make organizations appear larger, older, and more permanent than any single person. That continuity is powerful. Because it tells new recruits that the group existed before them, and will exist after them. Behind every symbol lies a system. Behind every ritual lies a purpose. And behind every prison gang lies a question. Can that cycle ever be broken? Exiting the system, defection, debriefing, and breaking the cycle. The hardest decision. Joining a gang can happen in days. Leaving can take years. For many incarcerated individuals, departure from a prison gang is one of the most dangerous choices they may ever consider. Membership often brings protection, identity, and access. Leaving can mean losing all three at once. Former inmates, investigators, and prison researchers have described the same pattern repeatedly. Those who attempt to step away may face suspicion from former allies, hostility from rivals, and scrutiny from prison staff. Even when violence does not occur, the social cost can be severe. Isolation, loss of trust, constant pressure. This is why many remain involved longer than they intended. Not because loyalty never fades, but because consequences remain real. What debriefing means. In several U.S. prison systems, especially historically in California, one path out of gang affiliation became known as debriefing. Debriefing generally refers to a formal process where an inmate provides information about gang structure, membership, or operations in exchange for removal from validated gang status or transfer to safer housing. Supporters argued it helped dismantle dangerous organizations. Critics argued it placed inmates at serious risk by labeling them cooperators. Over time, this process became one of the most controversial anti-gang tools in corrections. Some inmates used it to leave gang life. Others feared it completely. Policies changed over the years, especially after legal challenges and reforms. But for decades, debriefing stood at the center of one difficult question. How do you let someone leave without creating new danger? Protective housing and segregation. When inmates are threatened by gangs, or by others, correctional systems may place them in protective custody or specialized housing. The goal is safety. Separate vulnerable individuals from those who may harm them. But protection inside prison can come with trade-offs. Less movement, fewer programs, greater isolation, and in some facilities, a stigma attached to being separated from the general population. For former gang members trying to disengage, these units may offer temporary relief. They may also create new psychological strain. Researchers have long noted that safety and isolation often exist in tension inside correctional settings. Why some members walk away? Not every exit is forced. Some members choose to disengage. Reasons vary. Fatigue, religious conversion, family responsibilities, long sentences that change perspective, or simple exhaustion from constant conflict. Former gang members interviewed in research studies often describe a moment when the costs outweighed the benefits. Protection no longer felt worth the pressure. Status no longer felt meaningful. Violence no longer felt sustainable. These turning points are deeply personal, and they do not guarantee safety. But they show that even rigid systems can lose their hold over time. The role of education and programs. One of the strongest long-term alternatives to gang identity is structured opportunity. Education programs, vocational training, therapy, conflict resolution, substance abuse treatment. These programs do not eliminate gangs overnight. But numerous correctional studies suggest they can reduce violence, improve behavior, and give inmates identities not built on affiliation. A man known only as a gang member may begin to see himself as a student, a father, an electrician, a welder, a person with a future beyond prison politics. That shift can be powerful, because gangs often thrive where purpose is absent. Can prison gangs be defeated? Can prison gangs be eliminated completely? Most experts are cautious. Many researchers and correctional officials argue that gangs are symptoms as much as causes. They grow where prisons are overcrowded, where safety is weak, where opportunity is limited, where identity and protection are scarce. Removing leaders may disrupt activity. New leaders often emerge. Lockdowns may suppress violence. Underlying tensions can remain. This does not mean progress is impossible. Many systems have reduced gang influence through intelligence-led management, rehabilitation efforts, and better prison conditions. But history suggests that pure force alone rarely solves the problem. Because organized groups adapt. The human cost. Behind every statistic is a human cost. Victims of assaults. Families affected by long sentences. Officers working under constant stress. Young inmates drawn into systems they barely understood. Former members trying to rebuild after years of violence. And communities outside prison shaped by networks that began behind bars. Gang stories are often told through power and fear. But the deeper story is loss. Lost years. Lost trust. Lost futures. That cost is harder to measure than arrests or incidents. But it may be the most important reality of all. Final conclusion. Blood in, blood out became famous as a phrase of fear. But behind the slogan lies something more complex. Prison gangs are built through ritual, loyalty, pressure, and survival. They promise protection. They often demand obedience. They create belonging. They can also trap people inside identities built for conflict. Some rise within them. Some die within them. Some spend years trying to leave them. And some succeed. Understanding these organizations means looking past myth, past movies, past headlines, toward the real conditions that allow them to grow. Because if the causes remain, the cycle often returns. This has been Life Behind Bars. If you want more factual prison documentaries based on real cases, real systems, and real history, subscribe to the channel. Behind every wall, there is always another story.